Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Wendy Ologe, the intentional part. You're welcome back. And today we're going to be talking about reasons why you do not need to hit your child. I know that this is a very controversial topic and that a lot of parents are going to come here and say, oh, what's she talking about? Let's get on it. One of the 10 reasons why you do not need to hit your child is that hitting models hitting. Now, recently, a mother reached out to me to say that his 1-year-old son was being beaten by her 3-year-old son. Sorry, her 3-year-old daughter was always hitting her 1-year-old son. And by the time we started doing the analysis and then we started going through the process, one of the first questions I asked her was, how do you discipline your children? And she said, oh, of course I hit them, and of course that's it. So this mother, children love to imitate people, so especially people who they love and respect. So part of what your child is going to be doing is that your child is going to mimic your process. So if hitting a child is part of your disciplinary strategies, it means that your child is going to hit another person. So it models hitting. So hitting models hitting. So when you hit, you are only teaching the child that it's okay for you to actually just do that kind of circle. When people say, oh no, but what else can you do, there's a discipline that works. If you've ever read my book, The Discipline That Works, you're going to see all the things that you need to learn as regards the strategies that you can use to replace hitting a child. Now that's number one. Number two, verbal and emotional abuse is also it also goes hand in hand with hitting. Many times when people say, I just hit a child physically, many times there are words that go with it, expression of our words. All right, so physical hitting doesn't just come with the physical hitting, it comes with the anger. A lot of people say, oh, you can hit a child without getting angry. Well, I usually say that the anger emotions will lose you at some point. So it means that when you begin to actually hit, you can't really hit another person without a level of anger, expression of whatever it is that the person has done wrong. So of course that brings you to the point where you now begin to get really aggressive. Sometimes you're able to control the aggression if you know how to regulate your emotions, but many times you actually are not able to do that. Number two, hitting devalues the child. How do I mean? Hitting devalues the child. So the child's self-image begins with how he perceives others, especially his parents. So he perceives his parents even in the most loving homes. It confuses the message. When you hit a child, the child is confused, especially to the child that is too young to understand the reason why you needed to actually hit them. So parents spend a lot of time building up their child's sense of being valued, helping the child feel good, and then the child breaks a glass, then you hit the child. And the child feels, I must be really bad. That's why I got hit. All right? The child does not have the regulation, the ability to be able to separate what they've done and and themselves, their being. So they read it like, I must be bad, that's why I'm being hit. Okay, so even guilt relieving hug from a parent after spank doesn't remove that sting. When people say, oh, when you finish hitting the child, you bring them up with the other hand and then you hug them and all that. That doesn't remove that devaluing that we're talking about. The child is definitely going to feel the heat inside and out. So long after the hug. Most children put in this situation will hug to ask for mercy. If I hug him, daddy will stop hitting me. When spanking is repeated over and over, one message is driven home to the child. We are weak, you are weak and defenseless. The child reads it. I'm weak, I'm defenseless. There's nothing I can do about the situation. And that's self-defeat. And as much as we're looking at it from this angle now, there's a lot to it later on in life as a child who becomes an adult. So, for instance, Joanne, for instance, the name of a mother, a loving mother, believed that spanking was, a parental right, an obligation, needed to turn out, an obedient child. Now, she feels that spanking a child is for the child's own good, which is, of course, one of the things that we say, oh, well, I have to hit the child, is for the child's own good. So after several months of the flogging controlled discipline, that's what we'll call it, and the toddler becomes withdrawn, or even the preschooler, or your preteen, or even your teenager, because I know that in Nigeria, there are a lot of spanking of teenagers that go on. All right, they become withdrawn. So she will now notice that the child is playing alone in the corner, not interested in playmates, avoiding eye contact with her, has lost the sparkle. Outwardly, he's that good child that you want, but inwardly, that child has been thinking that he's a bad child. I shared something on my timeline today, and I said that abuse, when you abuse a child, the child does not stop loving you. The child actually stops loving themselves. So it's not just about you. The child will love you. Nothing is going to stop that, but the child will begin to look at themselves and devalue themselves. All right, so imagine that can make the child more smaller, weaker, overpowered by people who are bigger than him. So if you constantly use aggression to model discipline, you find out that the child feels devalued, the child feels powerless, and that's a risk for your child in itself. All right, so imagine we what we call slapping hands. It's so tempting to slap those deary little hands. Many parents do it without even thinking, but consider the consequences. Maria Montessori, which is one of the earliest opponents of slapping children's hands, believed that children's hands are tools for exploring. It's an extension of the child's natural curiosity. So when you slap them, you send the powerful negative message to the child. And then sensitive parents, have been interviewed, and they all agree that the hands should be off limits for any kind of physical punishment. It's important to note that research actually supports this idea, because psychologists studied a group of 16, 14-month-old children playing with their mothers. When one group of toddlers tried to grab a forbidden object, they received a slap on the hand. All right. Then the other group of toddlers did not receive a physical punishment. So in follow-up studies of these children 7 months later, the punished babies were found to be less skilled at exploring their environment. Better to separate the child from the object or supervise his exploration and leave the little hands unhurt. So that's one of the things that you want to look at. So you want to look at the after effect that goes beyond now and not just in the now. Okay, so we're still sharing on the reasons why you should not hit your child. We've had reason number 1, number 2, and now we're on reason number 3. I said that hitting devalues the parent. Parents who spank I call them the cane-wielding parents, or the parents who actually abuse or punish their children often feel devalued themselves after they actually do that. Many times they do not agree that they feel devalued, but when you really think about it, when you really, calm down, you will realize that they actually feel devalued. All right? So they feel afterwards, one of the reasons why you actually will want to hit the child is because you do not have alternatives. You do not know what else to do better. I usually say that if you know how to do what to do, you will do that better. Because there are ways, there are tools that you can use instead of just hitting a child. So oftentimes they actually spank or they hit in desperation because they don't know what else to do. So, but afterwards, they feel more powerless when they find out that it doesn't work. So because you do not know exactly what to do, there's this thing, about you feeling, and so, okay, yes, I have hit this child. Okay, so, and nothing has worked. And then what? That's actually where the risk comes in. So you feel devalued. You feel that you could have done this, in a better way. So one of the things, one of the things that one of the parents that reached out to me, usually would say, is that I won the battle, but I lost the war. So my child now fears me, and I feel I have lost something precious. Yes, you can win the battle, but you end up losing the war. So what you do is that your child is now afraid of you, so now what? So you feel devalued because you can't really connect with your child truthfully, and that's a risk. So spanking devalues the role of a parent. The role, that role that you have as a parent, it devalues it. It makes you powerless. A parent shouldn't feel powerless. Being an authority figure means that you are trusted. I keep saying this over and again. You are trusted, you are respected, and you're not feared. Fear and force is not authority. Authority is respect and trust. So lasting authority cannot be based on fear. So if you want to create lasting authority, you do not want to create a fearful environment for your child. Parents or other caregivers who repeatedly use flogging to control their children enter into a lose-lose situation. Not only does the child lose respect for you, but the parents also lose out because they develop a mindset, a flogging mindset that there are no alternatives. All you do is once your child does anything, you wail the king. The parent has fewer pre-planned, experienced, tested strategies to be able to divert potential behaviors because you haven't learned it. So the child misbehaves even more, which now calls for more flogging. Because I say that discipline is teaching. If your strategy, whatever strategy you're using, is not teaching your child, then there's a problem. The child is not being taught to develop inner control. So the child is just doing whatever it is that they want. So since the child cannot control themselves internally, it becomes even more difficult for you to stop to flog the child. So at the end of the day, you find out that it doesn't really work. Number 4, let's quickly get on it. Hitting a child may actually lead to abuse. Yes. By the time I said earlier on that the anger emotion loses you. So punishment escalates. Once you begin punishing a child little bit, where do you stop? A toddler reaches out for a glass. You tap the hand as a reminder not to touch. He reaches out again. You bring out, your hand and swat the hand. After withdrawing his hand briefly, he reaches out again and grabs, something else, maybe a valuable verse or something. You hit the hand even harder. You've begun a game that no one can win. Now that's the risk. No one can win. So the issue becomes, who is stronger? Who is going to back down? So your child's will or your hand? So not the problem of touching whatever it is. What do you do now? Hit harder and harder until the child's hand is so sore that he can't possibly continue to disobey. Now that's where the abuse comes in. Because you will now create a setting for power tussle where the child is now ready. So the child will continue until he gets to the point where the thing becomes so painful that they won't be able to do it again. That is where we now see people discipline their children. In Nigeria, I have heard stories, I don't know about other clients, where parents actually get to a point of using pepper to put in their children's eyes just because they want to prove a point. At what point do you stop? That is abuse. That's not love. That's not discipline. We can't do these things and still agree that that's discipline. So parents Parents who are programmed to punish set themselves up for punishing harder. So mainly because they've not learned alternatives, and of course they can click immediately into punishment mode when their children misbehaves. So you need to understand that hitting your child continuously may actually lead to you abusing the child without you even knowing that you are abusing the child. Because the will become stronger. Where do you stop? Now that's the question. Let's move quickly. Number 5, hitting your child does not improve the behavior. It doesn't improve the behavior. So many times we have seen that when you hit a child, you need to continue the circle. So we've had parents say, the more I spank, the more the child misbehaves. What do you think happens? The child is not being taught how to control their inner emotions. What is happening is that the child is just being hit and the child does not understand exactly what they need to do per time. So the basis for promoting desirable behavior, the child who feels right will act right. So hitting a child undermines that principle. Hitting a child undermines that principle. A child who hits, who is hit feels wrong inside, and this shows up in his behavior. All right, the more he misbehaves, the more he gets flogged, and the worse he feels. So the cycle continues. So we want children to know what they've done wrong and to feel remorse, but still believe that he's the person who has value. So the children will do something wrong. The ability to separate a child from what it is that they've done cannot come when you're a cane-wielding parent. It is difficult because you are not able to actually internalize some of those things. When you're able to control some of those things, you're able to teach your child control. It's easier. It's easier to actually get your child to understand things when you are calmer. So misbehaviors get worse when you hit a child and it decreases self-esteem and then promotes anger. So the moment you hit a child, the child is angry. Obviously angry. So one of the goals of disciplinary action is to stop his behavior immediately, and flogging is just a quick fix. It just fixes it at that time, and that's it. So it's more important to create conviction within the child that he doesn't want to repeat the misbehavior. So you need to create a conviction, internal rather than external control. So your control should be looking beyond the external thing and looking to the internal thing. So one of the reasons for ineffectiveness of hitting a child in creating internal controls is that during and immediately after the spanking, the child is so preoccupied with the perceived injustice. Remember, the child is going to feel, did I deserve this? This is just not right. This is injustice. All right? Injustice of physical punishment. Or maybe he forgets the reason of why he was actually being flogged. A lot of the times when that happens, the children just sit down. Oh, they flog the children. The child is angry. Instead of thinking of exactly what they've done and why they've been spanked, the child just becomes angry, upset completely. And I don't think that's one of the things that you aim to achieve when you hit. Number 6, hitting a child is actually not, it is not a religious thing, it's not a biblical thing. People say, oh no, but the Bible says we should hit a child. The Bible didn't say we should hit. The Bible says spare the rod. He said a child that is spared, the rod spared is not. He said a fully is bound up in the heart of the child. That's Proverbs 22:15. But the rod of discipline will drive it far away. Rod in the Bible was also used to use word to as words. So what exactly does that mean to you? The rod can be your word. And when you speak your words, I usually say raise your words, not your voice. When you speak more words, it gets more internalized. I was reading, somewhere about David and Goliath, and where it was saying that David spoke more words than Goliath ever did. So your words can actually get you victory instead of just having to use force all the time. So the word of correction imparts wisdom, but a child left to himself is a disgrace to the mother. That's what the Bible says. And this word of correction is important for us to know that this can mean the words that we use. Right? Let's not get into that so much, because that's a whole lot of talk on its own. Now, number 7, hitting a child promotes anger in both the child and in the parent. One of the stories that I like to share is a story about the Nigerian pastor who was a son who was killed by the son. What happened? Anger. The boy was slapped. The boy was about 21, and because he couldn't say amen while praying, the boy got so upset and stabbed his dad. So it models anger on both your side, on the side of the child. Alright? So children actually perceive flogging as unfair. So they are more likely to rebel against corporal punishment than against disciplinary techniques that actually are effective. Children don't think rationally like adults, so they have an innate sense of fairness. Though their standards are not the same as adults, they can prevent, it can prevent your punishment from working as you hoped it would. Alright? Because oftentimes the sense of unfairness escalates to the feeling of humiliation. When punishment humiliates a child, they either rebel or they withdraw. In my book, I said there are 4 different kinds of reactions that your child will give when you discipline your child wrongly. Your child can rebel, your child can recoil, your child can retaliate. Alright? So you need to be careful. You need to look at these things. Once your punishment is wrong, your disciplinary strategy, is wrong, you will find out that your child will go to these negative R's. That's what we call them, the 4 R's of negative discipline. Sometimes the child does nothing. Sometimes the child wants to retaliate. Sometimes the child gets so angry that they rebel. Sometimes they just recoil, they just go into their shell. Alright? So while hitting may appear to make the child afraid to repeat whatever misbehavior that you're talking about, it's more likely to make the child fear the spanker. The flogger, the cane-wielding parent will be feared. So now it's not about regulation of whatever it is that your child should be doing. So I usually say that I just don't want my children to obey me all the time. I want them to be able to be morally, the moral standards to be able to keep up with it. Because I might not even be correct. Not might, I am not correct all the time. That's the truth. So when you go through that, children whose behaviors are flogging controlled throughout infance and childhood actually appear outwardly compliant, but inside they are setting with anger. They are setting with anger. They feel that their personhood has been violated. They feel abused and they detach themselves from the world they perceive has been unfair to them. They find it difficult to trust. They become insensitive to the world that have been insensitive to them. So parents who examine their feelings after hitting their child realize that they have accomplished, all they have accomplished is just to relieve themselves of anger. Anger, that's all you've accomplished. So the impulse release of anger, becomes addicting. So perpetuating a circle of ineffective discipline. So every time you're angry, you hit and then you release it, and that's it. That's a circle of addiction. So for every time you're angry, you hit the child, I feel better. Then of course, that's what addiction is about. You become addicted to it. So it will that will these are the 2 things that you think in your head. You think that that we will not. You need to understand. We have found out that the best way to prevent ourselves from acting on impulse, hitting, is to instill 2 convictions into our heads. One of it is that we will not hit our children. One of it is that we will discipline our children. So since we have decided that hitting is not an option, we need to seek better alternatives. The question is, what are these better alternatives? Like I said, I shared a lot. I shared like 10 different tools that you can use in my book, The Discipline That Works, and you will be happy that you read that piece. Okay, all right, so let's get going. Number 8, flogging a child brings back bad memories. Whenever the child is flogged, the child sits in a corner and begins to think about all the things, all the wrong things that they've done in the past. You know, they can scar them. You know, the joyful sins of growing up, it can scar those sins. You know, people are more likely to recall traumatic events than pleasant ones. That's the truth. So, you know, by the time you grow up in a nurturing home, but you were deserved of flogging from time to time, the truth is that you're going to remember these sins. All right? So it's important that you understand that this can bring back memories that are not okay. Abusive flogging has bad long-term effects. That's another thing. Research has shown that when you actually abuse your child, you leave scars deeper and more lasting than a flirting redness of the bottom. So in perspective study, spanking, you know, you need to understand that when you hit, there's a long time effect for the child. So it's not just in the now. All right, number 10. We've gone through the 10 whys you should not be hitting your child. Spanking doesn't work. Hitting a child does not work. Many studies have shown that hitting a child as a disciplinary strategy does not work. But the truth is that, you know, I have also seen studies where they said spanking a child works, but none of it has shown its usefulness. So in the past years, there have been observation of thousands of families who have tried to hit their children and found out that it doesn't work. Okay, so we've been sharing the reasons why you should not hit your child. And part of the things that we've shared, now we're going to number 10. We have shared 9 reasons why you should not hit your child. Just go through them, internalize them again, and look at it. So number 10, hitting your child does not work. And I said that when you rely on hitting a child as your primary mode of discipline, and of course it makes your child not to be able to grow in knowledge. Remember, your aim is to teach your child to grow in knowledge. All right, so the moment you find out that you are growing in knowledge, you are learning better, and you are actually connecting with your child better, you find out that your reason for actually hitting the child decreases. All right, you need to program yourself, you know, against hitting. In my home, we have been able to program ourselves against hitting a child, and we are committed, you know, to use the tools that work. And I tell you, that has worked. That has worked tremendously for the children. It has increased connection. When we want to correct them, they're so but they understand why. So you might want to actually start from you. I say that parenting is about you and not the child. So you need to start from you and begin to recreate your strategy. One of the first things that you will need to do is to understand how to manage your emotions. That's the first place that you need to start from. Because managing your emotions is one of the key things that actually will make you not to be that keen-wielding parent. Again, I'm going to just read out all the things that we have mentioned. We said that hitting a child does not work. That's one. And then we also shared that hitting a child actually brings back bad memories. All right, and then we also said that it causes bad abusive hitting can actually have long-lasting effect. We also shared that hitting is not biblical, is not spiritual, is not anything. And then we also share that hitting does not improve behavior. We also share that hitting devalues the parent. We share that hitting devalues the child. We also share that hitting models hitting. So please remember to subscribe to our videos if you have found this video valuable. Subscribe and look down and you will see the subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on the notification button, because that's what you will see whenever we share our videos, so that you get to be one of the first people who will get to watch our videos. We share videos every Tuesday, every Thursday, all the day. Do not forget to follow us on all our social media platforms. Thank you, and see you in other videos.